I'd like to start with Iran, if we can. Kayleigh and I have a lot of questions for you, as always. I'm just wondering if you have seen any details of this agreement beyond what we're already reporting in the media. And is there a likelihood that the president is correct, that he can, in fact, craft a better deal in the next 60 days than the JCPOA?
You know, the president's made a lot of promises. How many times has he told us this war is over? And how many times have we come back again to see it all fall apart? No, we have not seen the details. And of course, the devil is in the details. But here's the part we know for sure. We know that just before Donald Trump started bombing in Iran, that the Strait of Hormuz was open. And nobody was collecting any fees or tolls to be able to travel it. We know that Iran's $300 billion that was located all around the world was locked up tight, and Iran couldn't use it. And we know that there were heavy sanctions in place on the sale of Iranian oil. And we know that those things together were really putting a real vice on the country, and that the economy was in real trouble, and it was causing people to push back. Donald Trump then started bombing, claiming that his intention was to have regime change. Obviously, that hasn't happened. We don't know what's going to happen to the money put all around the world, but it sounds like Iran is going to come out of this with more money, with, they claim, an opportunity to get fees through the Strait of Hormuz, which Donald Trump somehow says is not the same as tolls. And so there we are. America has spent literally tens of billions of dollars halfway around the world. 14 American service members have died. Uncounted numbers of people in the Middle East have died. And Donald Trump still can't explain how one family in America is any better off.
Well, Senator, President Trump did say today that while he hadn't previously thought about it, he would like to see a final deal go before Congress. Would you be prepared to cast a vote for a deal that does bring an end to this war in the Middle East that you clearly thought we never should have gotten enmeshed with in the first place?
That we never should have gotten involved in, and that so far Republicans have voted consistently to let Donald Trump continue for as long as he wants. Like anything, it depends on what the details are here. Remember, Congress voted back in 2015 for a deal to keep Iran from ever developing a nuclear weapon. And then Donald Trump, all on his own, came in and tore that apart. And there's one more piece. How is it that we are somehow better off after Donald Trump has spent billions of dollars, killed American service members, bombed a foreign country or multiple foreign countries? Where are we any better off? That's what Donald Trump cannot explain to the American people. But I'll tell you this, the folks I'm hearing from back home will tell you where we're worse off, where the price of gasoline is through the roof. I hear from the farmers who say they can't afford to buy the fertilizer they need. I hear from truckers who say they can't afford to get out on the roads, that are having to pass those costs along to everything that gets shipped in America. I see it in the rising interest rates now. So I get how Donald Trump has made this country a lot worse off by bombing in Iran, but boy, he can't point to where we're better off.
Well, you know, you're hearing from Pete Hegseth as well, Senator, about money. And of course, he's there to make the case and was today in Congress for a massive budget request for the Pentagon. Senator Cornyn says the secretary told him the Pentagon needs $350 billion immediately, and then a $1.5 trillion budget for the Pentagon on an annual level. Is this money that the Pentagon needs now to replenish munitions? And will they get it?
So exactly how does he describe need? The Pentagon has not passed an audit. Secretary Hegseth comes out here, throws around a couple of numbers, but will not even give us the receipts for how much the war in Iran has cost. The numbers that they've put forward, you can just look at public records and tell they're not right. So he wants to come in here. He doesn't want to give us an honest accounting. He doesn't want to show us how he plans to spend the money and what it's for. And he wants over $1.5 trillion and more. I don't think so.
Senator, I'd like to ask you about another issue that is now live in your chamber ahead of Jay Clayton's nomination hearing tomorrow to be Director of National Intelligence. Are you willing, through unanimous consent, to expedite his confirmation process in the name of getting FISA Section 702 powers reauthorized?
So, actually, I think there's some things you need to separate in that question. The question of going forward expeditiously on Jay Clayton is a question about making sure that Mr. Pulte never sets foot inside the DNS building and never gets a look at all of our national security secrets. And I think that is a worthy goal. Now, understand this, I'm not voting for Jay Clayton. And the reason I'm not is I both worked with him on banking and saw his views about deregulation generally and the role of government. But I am particularly alarmed about what he has done in terms of election denialism and conspiracy theories. We don't need somebody like that who can look into every part of America's secrets, both domestic and internationally. I don't know what it is that now guides him. He is certainly not just the Wall Street person. He now seems to have a very different view when he's talking about national security. And remember, he's someone who has zero experience in intelligence and national security. And the statute itself requires that the person in that role have that experience. So there's the question about expediting so that Pulte stays out of the building. There's the separate question about confirming Jay Clayton. And then there's the third question about FISA. And that one is a separate one yet. As it stands right now, I do not support the bill.
You mentioned Kevin Warsh at the beginning of our conversation. Got his first Fed meeting as chair tomorrow, Senator. You, of course, put a lot of weight on financial disclosures in his confirmation hearing. As he prepares to meet the press, and it looks like he is widely expected to not cut rates, as the president has urged. Did you get the information that you need? Are you comfortable with Kevin Warsh as the chair of the Fed?
No, I am not comfortable. And I'm not comfortable because we have never gotten enough disclosure to know for certain that there are not conflicts of interest. I am not comfortable with anyone who is not straight up and honest and transparent with the American people.
Do you still think he's a sock puppet if he doesn't cut rates tomorrow?
Well, we will see. Look, right now, Donald Trump has actually put Kevin Warsh in a pretty terrible box. And that is that Trump's policies on tariffs, on energy, on health care, and on wars around the world mean that prices are shooting through the roof for American families. And as you know, inflation is at its highest rate in about 3.5 years. And we see that what's coming down the line looks like prices may be going up even faster. And that means that the place ordinarily the Fed would go with its tool is to raise interest rate. But that increases costs for American families. And American families don't need to pay more on their credit cards, on mortgages, and on car loans. They're already slammed against the wall trying to pay for groceries and for health care and for housing. So Donald Trump's policies outside the Fed monetary policy are really creating havoc in this economy. And what the Fed can do about it is pretty limited.
Well, Senator, you raised housing, and I know you're about to go to the floor yourself to advance a housing bill that now apparently has bicameral buy-in. We have seen a lot of volleying back and forth between your chamber and the House of Representatives. What is it that unlocked this deal now, and when do you expect it could be on President Trump's desk for signature?
Oh, so look, as you know, we are in a housing crisis all over this country. We need more housing. And this bill has about 45 provisions in it, each one of which moves us toward an increase in total housing supply. Plus, this is the first bill ever in American history to put some constraints on private equity and say that they can't come into your neighborhood, buy up every house on the block, and try to turn America into a nation of renters instead of owners. So it's a pretty historic bill. We've got great bipartisan buy-in, and we've got the House in the right place on it now, too. So I think we're going to get this done and get it over to the president's desk.
I'd like to ask you about SpaceX before you leave us, Senator. You fought to delay the IPO, which was the biggest in the world, and the stock continues to rise since the debut. I wonder if, since it is obviously now part of the market, if you plan to follow up as ranking member, will there be an investigation into any of the exemptions that were made, specifically the seasoning exemption at the NASDAQ? What's next for you in this saga?
So look, let me just remind you what my concerns are. The first one was with the IPO. It is the job of the SEC to check the homework, to make sure that the financials make sense. And remember, the financial experts out there, a lot of them were calling the numbers that Elon Musk put forward nonsensical. Those were the words from the experts. The SEC clearly did not play its watchdog function that it is required to play. Then the index providers turned around, changed their rules. And remember, these index providers, there's usually a delay from an IPO so that any froth can die down. And before the index starts buying in, we know we're kind of at the right price on this stock. The index providers haven't done that. And that means for just ordinary 401k investors, people who just want a calm retirement and just a little piece of whatever's going on in the market, they're forced to take on AI, even if they see to take on SpaceX, even if they see this as a giant bubble or a lot of froth or even fraud, because of the way the index providers have done this. And then the third concern I have is that in the IPO, Elon Musk has pulled back on shareholder protections, so that, in effect, he has locked himself in as king for life in SpaceX. And my concern on every one of these is partly about SpaceX, but it's partly about our markets generally. Our market is the envy of the world. And the reason for that is, for years now, nearly a century, we've had a tough watchdog who makes sure that everybody's numbers add up. You can make your own decision about where you think this company is going, but that what they're telling you is pretty straight up. And if we start to lose that in a case like this and lose it for the future, then that chills investors all over the United States, puts them at risk, and makes people around the world say, you know, that may not be the safest market to go to. Maybe I ought to trade somewhere else where the watchdog is still awake.